Okay, let's get right into it. There's this system in Texas, right? It holds the keys to freedom for thousands, but honestly, it feels like it's wrapped in fog sometimes. Lots of mystery, lots of misunderstanding. You might think you know how parole works, maybe that it's just about getting out early, but it's way more complicated than that.
Exactly. And what's really interesting is how often folks mix up parole with other ways people get released. Getting clear on why these differences matter, well, it's crucial if you're dealing with the Texas justice system.
So, if you've been trying to figure out how this journey to freedom actually works for people inside Texas prisons, or, what really goes into those huge decisions, then you're in the right place. We're going to break it all down today. We want to cut through that confusion, give you some real clarity, confidence, and just the straight truth about the Texas parole system. We'll walk through it from eligibility all the way to release and everything that happens in between. It's about understanding that path to second chances, to restoration.
Yeah, understanding the why is key. Why is parole different? Why these steps? It's not just rules for rules' sake.
And the absolute first thing, the bedrock truth we got to start with is this. In Texas, parole, it's a privilege. It's definitely not a right you automatically get.
That's fundamental. It's discretionary, meaning it's decided case by case. Someone actually has to evaluate everything. It's not just hitting a date on the calendar and walking out.
Okay, so keeping that in mind, privilege, not a right. Let's talk eligibility. When can someone even be considered? For most felonies, we're talking first, second, third degree. The person needs to serve 25% of their sentence, a quarter of the time. Seems simple enough.
Right. But then you have what they call 3G offenses. These are the really serious ones. Aggravated sexual assault, murder, certain violent crimes often linked to gangs. For those, eligibility jumps way up. You have to serve 50% of the sentence, half the time. And sometimes for things like capital murder or aggravated sexual assault, it can be even longer, potentially up to 40 years before eligibility even starts.
So that 50% rule for 3G, it's not random. It shows how seriously the state views these crimes, right? More accountability needed?
Exactly. It sends a clear message. And the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, TDCJ, they're the ones who calculate the specific parole eligibility date. They look at the law, any credit for time served before sentencing, that all factors in.
Okay, what about good time credits? People hear that and think, great, time knocked off my sentence.
That's a super common misunderstanding. Look, good time is real. You earn it with good behavior, following the rules inside. It's definitely an incentive. But, and this is the key part for non-aggravated offenses, good time only makes you eligible for parole sooner. It does not shorten the total sentence you were given. Big difference.
Wow, okay. So good behavior helps you get looked at earlier, maybe, but doesn't actually cut the sentence itself short.
Precisely. It helps manage things inside, gives folks a reason to stay on track, but it's not a magic eraser for the sentence length. Helps manage expectations, too.
Got it. So let's say someone's eligibility date is getting close, maybe helped by some good time. What's the next step? How does the system gear up?
All right, so about 6 months before that eligibility date hits, an institutional parole officer, they call him an IPO, flags the case. They start pulling the file together.
The IPO, like a case manager inside.
Kind of, yeah. They do a really thorough review. They compile a case summary. This isn't just a quick look. It includes the original offense details, the person's entire criminal history.
And their behavior inside prison must be huge, right?
Absolutely. Disciplinary record, how they've conducted themselves, that's major. Plus, and this is really important, participation in programs, education, job training, treatment programs, anything showing effort towards rehabilitation.
And part of that summary is the parole plan, the person's plan for coming home.
Yes, exactly. Where will they live? Who's supervising? What about a job? Any ongoing treatment needed. It's their roadmap back to the community.
Can families help with this part, like sending letters?
Definitely. The person or their lawyer can submit what's called a parole packet. This can have letters of support, certificates from programs, anything that shows readiness for release and paints a fuller picture.
What about victims? Do they have a say?
Yes, they do. Victims have the right to provide statements. They can even ask to speak directly with the person leading the decision on the panel. It's part of balancing everything: the person's progress, public safety, and the impact on victims. A tough balancing act.
Okay, so the IPO puts together this whole package, the summary, the plan, maybe a parole packet, victim input. Where does it go? Who makes the call?
It goes to a parole panel. Usually it's 3 people, typically 1 board member and 2 commissioners. They review everything the IPO gathered.
Just 3 people for most cases?
For most, yes. But for the most serious violent crimes, it might take the whole board, all 7 members, and require a 2/3 vote to grant parole. Higher stakes, higher threshold.
And they're not just going on gut feelings, are they?
No, not at all. They use evidence-based guidelines. There are two main tools. One is a risk assessment, looks at criminal history, age, behavior in prison, rehab efforts, things like that.
Okay, risk assessment. What's the other tool?
The other is an offense severity classification. Basically, how serious was the crime itself. These tools help them score the case, to try and make decisions fair and consistent across the board.
Makes sense. Data-driven. So after they review and score everything, what are the possible outcomes? What can the panel decide?
Well, the best case scenario for the individual is grant parole. That means, yes, release is approved. Often, though, it comes with conditions like mandatory treatment or counseling.
Okay, Grant. What else?
They could defer. This isn't a no, it's more like a not yet. The panel might think the person needs to complete a specific program, maybe finish substance abuse treatment before they're ready. So they delay the decision.
And the third option.
That's a deny, sometimes called a set-off. Parole is not granted. When this happens, they schedule a new review date, usually 1 to 5 years down the road, depending on how severe the offense was.
So a denial isn't necessarily the end of the line forever, but it means waiting longer and focusing more on rehabilitation.
Right. It underscores that need for continued positive change.
So let's say someone gets the green light, parole is granted. What happens between that vote and actually walking out?
That kicks off the release planning phase. It's like an audit of the proposed parole plan. They double-check everything. Housing is secure, supervision is arranged, employment looks solid, treatment is set up.
So verifying the plan is real and ready, how long does that usually take?
Typically, once the plan is audited and approved, release happens within about 2 to 6 weeks. It gives TDCJ time to coordinate everything with the parole division, make sure all the pieces are in place for a smooth transition.
Okay, 2 to 6 weeks. Then they're out. But it's not total freedom, right? There's supervision.
Absolutely not total freedom. They report to a parole officer. They have specific conditions set by the board they have to follow. This supervision is crucial for public safety and for supporting the person as they reintegrate.
What if they slip up? What if they violate those conditions?
Well, the parole officer can issue a warrant or a summons. Violations can be anything from committing a new crime, which is obviously very serious, down to technical stuff.
Technical, like?
Like missing appointments, failing a drug test, losing an approved job without permission, changing residence without approval, things like that.
So what happens then? Do they automatically go back to prison?
Not necessarily. First, there's usually a preliminary hearing to see if there's probable cause a violation occurred, unless the person waives it. Based on that hearing, several things can happen. Parole might just continue, maybe with stricter conditions. Or they could be sent to an intermediate sanction facility like a rehab center or halfway house, sort of a middle ground.
Or the third option.
Or, if it's serious enough or repeated violations, parole can be revoked. And yes, that means going back to prison to serve out the rest of the sentence. It's about accountability, but also trying to find ways to keep people successful in the community, if possible.
Okay, this is complex. Now, you mentioned earlier people confuse parole with other releases. Let's talk about mandatory supervision. How is that different? This seems to trip a lot of folks up.
Yes, it's a really critical difference. Mandatory supervision is statutory. That means the law dictates it. It's based purely on adding up calendar time served, plus good time credits earned.
Purely math, then.
Pretty much. And here's the kicker. Mandatory supervision is only available for non-violent, non-3G offenses. If your sentence is for one of those serious 3G crimes, you are not eligible for mandatory supervision release, period.
So nonviolent only, based on time plus good time. Automatic if you meet the criteria.
Correct. Automatic by law once the time adds up. Parole, remember, is always discretionary. Always involves that panel review and vote, regardless of the offense type or time served, once you hit eligibility.
So someone might be eligible for both parole review and hit their mandatory supervision date around the same time.
It's possible, especially for those non-3G offenses. But how they get out, whether by a discretionary parole vote or automatic mandatory supervision, is fundamentally different. Really highlights the different paths the system creates.
And this whole system, it's not set in stone, right? It changes.
Oh yeah, it's definitely evolving. We're seeing reforms happening now. There was a bill in 2024, HB 1227, that put more focus on rehabilitation, but also tightened eligibility in some ways. That balancing act again.
What else is happening?
Well, the state budget for 2026-27 has significant money, like $134 billion, earmarked for probation and diversion programs, trying to find alternatives to incarceration. It also aims to streamline medical parole.
Medical parole.
Yeah, for inmates who are terminally ill or need long-term care. Streamlining that is projected to release about 1,700 people a year, starting around 2028.
So the trend seems to be towards more rehab focus, finding different paths.
It seems that way. Plus, you have the Sunset Commission reviews. It's a regular legislative checkup on state agencies. They're pushing for more fairness in rehab, better accountability, and even looking at second-look parole reviews for some folks who were sentenced very young. The system is definitely trying to adapt.
Okay, so wrapping this up, the big picture of the Texas parole system. It's structured, it relies on evidence, it's focused on rehab and public safety, but ultimately it's a discretionary decision. A path with checks and balances designed for second chances, but also serious accountability.
Exactly. And if you're trying to navigate this or support someone who is, there are things you can do to improve the chances of success. These come right from how the system works.
Like what? Give us some practical takeaways.
Okay, first, stay out of trouble inside. Keep that disciplinary record clean. It maintains good time status and just shows stability. Second, get involved. Education, job training, treatment programs, participate actively. Show you're working on yourself.
Makes sense. What else?
Third, build a solid release plan. Where will you live? Who's your support? How will you find work? Have real answers. Fourth, that parole packet. Use it wisely. Thoughtful support letters, certificates, documentation. It helps the panel see the whole person.
And
Finally, consider getting legal help. Someone who knows the system can really help navigate the process, advocate effectively. It's complex. Having guidance can make a difference. It really raises the question, how can people best position themselves within this system, knowing these key pieces?
That's a lot to think about. And as you reflect on everything we've walked through today, maybe consider this. How does truly understanding how this complex system works, the rules, the steps, the goals, how does that knowledge empower not just individuals inside, but also their families, their communities? What role do accountability, redemption, and real community support play in making second chances actually work? Something to ponder. If you need help navigating the Texas criminal justice system, or if you're in Harris County and want to start the journey to a clean record, we're here for you. Visit legal-gangsta.com. Let me